Okay, so I'm actually gonna have a really hard time recording this video because honestly, I do agree with Niantic on a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about. So yeah, I'm going to be going against a lot of the things that I personally want for Pokemon Go. But I do think this is a very important discussion because at the end of the day, there is a harsh reality that Niantic has seemingly not accepted when it comes to Pokemon Go, and I do think it's about time that we have the community's voices get heard. Alright, so with that said, what's going on everyone? It's me, it's Jinsula. I hope you're having a good day, and welcome to today's Pokemon Go discussion video. So today I wanted to talk about this idea of solo content versus group or community-based content. I want to say for the past couple of years, Niantic has making a drastic push towards making a lot more community-based content, and they're gearing a lot of their game design around forcing players to play with a group. And I think because of that, players have been getting very frustrated and players have been not liking a lot of the things that Niantic has been doing for Pokemon Go, mainly because their playstyle is very different from what Niantic wants to do with their game. And like I said, there are going to be a couple of things that I disagree with, but at the same time, I do think it's very important that we talk about why the community is feeling a certain way. So yeah, when it comes to Pokemon Go, I think there is something that Niantic has not acknowledged for the past couple of years, and that is the very fact that when it comes to this game, it has definitely evolved over the years. There has definitely been a lot of moments where community-based play has produced a lot of great content for Pokemon Go, but at the same time, a lot of players have grown up with this game and they're starting to play the game a very specific way that I do not think Niantic fully understands. What do I mean by this? Well, first and foremost, I have to acknowledge that when it comes to Pokemon Go, some of the best experiences that I've ever had when it comes to this game, and some of the best experiences you've probably ever had, involve community-based play. That means playing together with a group when it comes to raid days and community days and big events like Pokemon Go Fest, and I think that when you're a part of a major community, that's when you're going to have the most fun with Pokemon Go. That's the part that I wish was a reality with this game. But unfortunately, over time, a lot of players have gotten very comfortable playing the game by themselves, and they would much rather do things in Pokemon Go like in-game events and raids and a lot of other things like PvP in their own pace. They do not want to actually go out and form groups with other players, they just want to play the game the way that they want to play, and I think this is something that Niantic has been completely out of touch with. Again, I really wish that the game was very similar to how it used to be when Pokemon Go first released, but I also want to recognize the reality that the game is just simply never going to be that ever again. But this is something that Niantic has not realized, and it's very evident with the way that they're designing their game. This was extremely evident most recently with the Gigantamax Pokemon debut event, because a lot of players were saying that when it came to the design of Gigantamax battles, Niantic was very much out of touch with how players like to play their game. They're only catering the game to a very small group of players, and that is city players and players who live in high population areas, or people who are living in areas with a very robust community. And I think because of that, a lot of players are feeling left in the dust. And it's very true, because for a lot of people, they just simply do not have the amount of players in their area to enjoy the game the way that Niantic is designing their game. They're creating a lot of different mechanics and they're creating a lot of different game modes and a lot of different aspects with Pokemon Go that require you to play with a large number of players. I mean, with Gigantamax battles, in order to take them down, you needed to have a trainer group that is at least 30 trainers in most cases. There are definitely some communities that were able to take down some of those Gigantamax Pokemon with a very few number of trainers, but they had a lot of coordination and a lot of team chemistry, which is something that not a lot of players have the luxury of having when it comes to Pokemon Go. So I think because of that, Niantic is very much designing their game in a way that is going to alienate a vast majority of players. And I do think this is something that needs to be addressed because, unfortunately, when it comes to Pokemon Go, there's just not a lot of fun to be had for the average player. And the reason for that is because whenever Niantic brings in something new and fresh into the game, it's something that not a lot of players are actually going to have access to. I mean, you also gotta consider this. What are the most popular raid bosses in Pokemon Go? It's not necessarily going to be the ones that are going to be game-changing, although the most relevant raid bosses are of course going to draw a crowd, but it's going to be the raid bosses that can be completed with the least number of trainers as possible. Raid bosses that can be duoed or even soloed. Those are going to be the raid bosses that are going to generate a lot of activity when it comes to raids. And I think this is something that has been the case over time. Back in the day, you did need a lot of trainers to take down even the easiest of raid bosses, but nowadays, with people having much more robust collections, people are looking to farm up rare candies and rare candies XLs with the most efficient means possible. And because of that, solo raiding content has become incredibly popular. So I do think this just goes to show that the game has evolved to a place where players are enjoying more solo elements and rather than doing a lot of community-based elements. I mean, I think what was a huge missed opportunity and something that I actually really enjoyed about Max Battles to begin with was that it was a great form of solo content in the beginning. When it came to some of the earlier Dynamax battles, like with the starter Pokemon as well as Wooloo, this was all stuff you could complete on your own terms. And I think because of that, I actually really enjoyed it. But when it came to more difficult max battles that required more than one trainer, I felt like that's when I started to fall away from max battles. I just simply did not enjoy it as much as I used to. And then when it came to Gigantamax battles, I just simply ignored it because there was no way that I would be able to actually get a group of about 30 trainers together. Sure, I could have gone over to a local community that was hosting a bunch of Dynamax battles, but I still feel like for what it's worth, it was going to be something that I was not going to be able to complete on my own pace. So I think because of this, Niantic needs to understand and comprehend that when it comes to Pokemon Go, not everyone is going to have the same experiences. I mean, they have certainly created a lot of gameplay elements in the past couple of years that actually does encourage this. I'm talking about routes as well as the daily adventure incense. Both of those are actually something I think is really well designed. When it comes to the daily adventure incense, that's probably the peak of something that Niantic implemented in the past couple of years that has actually been something really good for Pokemon Go. The very fact that it is free to use every single day, I think that is also really good, but more specifically, you get a lot of really good content for playing the game by yourself. And I think that's something that Niantic needs to do a lot more of when it comes to this game. And yes, you could still monetize it and have a very successful model to generate a lot of revenue off of more solo-based content. Not just with the daily adventure incense, but they could do a lot of different things with routes, for example, that for any player who is not in a large group or live in an area where there's not a huge population, they could still enjoy relevant content that actually gives you a lot of rewards. And I think this is something Niantic needs to do more of when it comes to this game. There's a lot of cool things that they could do with Pokemon Go that encourages solo play, but still at some levels have a community aspect to it. But Niantic hasn't really been thinking things through when it comes to some of their new releases. Like, Gigantamax Battles is obviously one example, but in general, with stuff like Party Play and with Shadow Legendary Raids and all of these content that is almost essential for the average player, the fact that a lot of that stuff can only be done in person just goes to show that they're trying to shoehorn players into communities. And for a majority of players, that's, for one, something that they just do not prefer to do when it comes to Pokemon Go, but also that's something that is just not even possible for a majority of players. There's definitely going to be a lot of communities that are going to be really strong, and there's definitely communities in my local areas that I think are robust and doing a lot of things that Niantic wants them to do. Like, for example, in my local areas, there is DTC, which is the largest community of Pokemon Go players within the Chicago area. And then there's the Chicagoland Pokemon Go group, which is really big for the suburbs of Chicago. And then I've been to all over different places in the world with large communities like Los Angeles, New Orleans, even in Petoskey, Michigan. Shout out to all the crew there because they have a close-knit group of trainers and they actually play the game a lot and do a lot of cool things as a community. And I really do think that ultimately what it comes down to is that Niantic needs to create stuff that actually incentivizes people to play together, but is also stuff that players can still enjoy playing by themselves. And I think because Niantic has failed to realize that Pokemon Go has evolved over the years, that's something that just hasn't been a thing with Pokemon Go, at least with some of the most recent releases. But even saying all of this, I still think it's not far-fetched that Niantic could create a lot of cool gameplay elements that players can enjoy alone. I think it's something that Niantic should explore, especially in 2025. Aside from doing a whole lot of community-based content, I think Niantic should start pivoting towards more solo-based content and creating a gameplay experience that can be enjoyed, even if you do not have yourself a community. Especially for players who live in rural areas or people who are disabled, they really have no means of playing in large communities. So I really do think this is something that Niantic should start walking away from, because for a majority of players, they do not get the experience of playing Pokemon Go in places like Tokyo or San Francisco, but it seems like that's the only lens that Niantic operates on, and it's not going to be healthy for the long-term success of Pokemon Go. Every single day, players are starting to play Pokemon Go for the very first time, and if their experiences are being hampered because they're being forced into communities that they're not familiar with, then I do think a majority of those players are eventually going to fall off because they just simply do not have access to a lot of the best stuff because they do not belong to a community. Sure, they can join a community and actually enjoy a lot of this content, but for a majority of people, that's just simply not going to be possible, and I really wish Niantic would recognize that, but yeah. In any case, these are just some of the things that I've been thinking about as of late, especially after the whole disaster with the Gigantamax Pokemon debut. I do think these are some of the things that Niantic needs to start recognizing, and hopefully they'll start designing their game in a way that's going to be a lot more accessible because, yeah, I think a lot of players are starting to get fed up with how Niantic has been handling Pokemon Go. But yeah, in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. Is there something that you feel Niantic could do to actually make Pokemon Go a lot more enjoyable by yourself? Definitely share what those things are, and yeah, let's have a great discussion, especially if you disagree with everything that I had to say, because I do think that having different opinions is definitely going to create a lot more constructive feedback. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. So yeah, hopefully this video was enjoyable, and if it was, make sure you hit that like button to support the channel, and don't forget to subscribe if it's your first time here, and don't forget that little bell as well so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And I want to give a shout out to all my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the content of the channel, the absolute best way to do so is always going to be by joining my Patreon. And if you become a paid Patreon member, I will give you a permanent spot on my in-game Pokemon Go friends list. So that means for stuff like remote raids in the friendship system. If you want to play Pokemon Go with me and you want a buddy in your friends list, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon. And if you want to support my channel in a different way that doesn't involve spending money, you could do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula. I'm on the platforms that you see on screen. Make sure you go over there and give me a follow. And with all that said, that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.